Hello, thank you for tuning in. I am Amit Ramnani of Ipanema Wealth, a financial planning firm which specializes in advising expatriates and international executives in Latin America. In today's video, I'll be discussing 5 tips for a healthier financial future, and I guess it's a good time to incorporate some of these into your New Year's resolutions. So I'll be discussing 5 tips in this video, and the link to a more detailed article is in the details section below this video. Feel free to contact us if you've got any specific inquiries. Contact us via our website, and within the next few days I'll be releasing another video discussing 5 more tips. So tune in for that one as well. So on that note, let's get started. So the first and most important starting point is to prepare an effective budget. Now that sounds easy, but the way you should really do it is break everything down on a spreadsheet. So all of your sources of income and then all of your costs and subcategories of the costs. Break it down. I know it sounds like a bit of a chore, but it's worth doing because you know what happens when, all of us say, well, let's go to the gym. It's a new year, let's go to the gym. A lot of people do this for January and February, and then it just kind of fizzles away and everyone resumes their original habits. So it's all about doing it and monitoring it. So what I suggest is create this budget, create this spreadsheet, so you'll be able to keep costs under control. I'm not asking you to give up that latte or that frappuccino every day. If you like it, do it. But I'm just saying, have an idea of where you're spending all of that money and what costs can be removed. What doesn't add value to your life? What doesn't give you that much pleasure? Do you have like a couple of subscriptions to, I don't know, magazines or mailing lists which you don't actually utilize? Well, get rid of them if it's not working for you. And then you'll be surprised at how those little savings can actually accumulate into a significant gain by the end of the year. So just try and keep all of your costs under control, because yes, it seems like, the odd saving here or there, but it compounds to quite a large amount, especially if you think of what you could do if you were to invest that amount of money. Your future self will be thanking you for, those small sums which are added together and compounded into a significant amount in the future. So yeah, make conscious decisions. Which costs can be reduced or reallocated. That'll be a very good method of starting out your financial planning for 2021. And as I said earlier, it's important to review your spending. So what I tend to do is I spend about 30 minutes at the beginning of every month just going through the spreadsheet and tallying up my finances, and it just makes life a little bit easier. It's now become a systematic process. So, in the beginning it needed a bit of work, but now it's very easy for me and it's easy for the clients I've advised on how to do this. And as an advisor, I have to say I find it really refreshing when I speak to clients who have a more accurate idea about how much they're saving, how much they're spending, and it should come as no surprise that people with that approach to financial planning have more successful outcomes in the long term. Wow, what a change of scenery. Now I've suddenly moved to Copacabana Fort. What a lovely view, eh? Well, this one's a little more challenging. Aim to save more. Now, of course, it's easier said than done, but think about your future self thanking you, right? We have to take ownership of our own financial planning. And yes, 2020 in particular has been a very challenging year for many people, and just keeping their head above water has been quite tricky in a year where many people have been forced out of business and have been forced to kind of tighten the belt. Yes, it's been challenging. So if you're able to, yes, I'd suggest see how you can accumulate more into your investment and savings pots, because the reality is in the future, especially with longer life expectancies, etc., we're going to have to depend more upon ourselves rather than governments to take care of us. And there are many reasons, like healthcare costs and care home costs. I mean, the whole dynamic of financial planning has changed. And earlier in my career, I used to talk about retirement. That was my word, planning for retirement. Yes, it's great if you can retire. It's even better if you can retire earlier than, let's say, the normal range of, let's say, 60 to 70. But I like to use the term financial independence. So if you can find any gains in relation to what I mentioned previously about having an effective budget, if you're able to find room to save, then it does all make a big difference in the longer term. Now, I tend to emphasize the importance of monthly or quarterly saving. Now, if you can save on a monthly basis, fantastic. It's probably easier for people who are receiving salary from a company. They can kind of structure themselves and organize themselves to actually have a direct debit coming out of their account, or to have a pension amount deducted at source. Whereas that's much more challenging if you're self-employed, because the temptation is to say, okay, I need to spend that money. I need to either spend it or reinvest it into my business in January. So I'm going to save double in February. That just keeps rolling over. So you've got to actually have a structure where you can save every month if possible, or at least every quarter, but try not to get into the habit of saying, okay, that amount has been earmarked for the end of the year, because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. There are going to be other priorities regarding investment into your own company or spending on yourself or family. There'll always be expenses. And you get to a certain age and then you haven't saved enough. It becomes very difficult the longer you leave it. Another valid point about investing at intervals on a periodic basis is that you're buying the average price of the market. So it depends on your asset allocation, but let's assume you're buying an index fund or a basket of shares in a certain sector. It's a much safer bet in terms of long-term investing outcomes if you invest on a monthly or quarterly basis, rather than applying all of that money into the market on one date at the end of the year, or on an ad hoc basis whenever you can. It's better to have a little bit more structure. Another valid point about investing on a monthly or quarterly basis is that you're buying the average price off the market. So let's imagine, whatever your asset allocation, let's assume you have an index fund or a basket of shares on one index or whatever. You're buying that on a monthly or quarterly basis, which is a more structured way of investing and buying the average price over a long horizon, which is far more likely to generate a positive outcome than if you apply the money on an ad hoc basis in different amounts whenever you can. It's better to have more structure. And to round off this point, let me remind you of what our friend Albert Einstein said about compound interest. I mean, he said it's the eighth wonder of the world, and he who understands it earns it. He who doesn't understand it pays it. So I'll leave you with that as food for thought. And here I am in downtown Rio with the Museo de Amanhã behind me. Worth visiting. But anyway, let's get on to point 3. This is a little bit more technical and very useful advice for expatriates in Brazil, especially those who are not familiar with the tax benefits available. But what we have here is Previdência Privada, which is a private pension structure, and it's very useful for anyone who's doing a complete tax declaration. You can either do a simple one or a complete one. Now, if you're doing a complete declaration, that means you can use deductibles to reduce your taxable income. And one of these deductibles is a Previdência Privada. And to be more specific, it's a PGBL, and that stands for Plano Gerador de Benefício Livre. And if you put, let's say your taxable income is 100,000 reals, you can invest up to 12% of that amount, in which case that would be 12,000 reals, right? And that would reduce your taxable income by 12%. So that means you'll only be taxed on 88% of your income. So 88,000 would be taxable. And you can also add other things like health and education, private health, private education, to reduce that further. But in relation to the scope of this topic here, we're talking about a PGBL as a savings vehicle, and you can invest into a wide range of funds through these vehicles, reduce your taxable income, and they also have the added benefit of being outside. They fall outside your inventario, which means they're not subject to Brazilian inheritance tax. Now, this is quite a detailed subject, so have a read of the article, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have and refer you to the appropriate professionals for more kind of further advice. On to our next point, and location. Wow, and in just the space of a few minutes, it appears that now we're in sunset mode. Anyway, behind me I have Vista Chinesa, Dois Irmãos. I'll get out of the way. You've got Pedro da Gávea. Beautiful, right? Anyway, let's talk about banking costs, shall we? Now, a lot of the expats I know here have the premium banking service of their respective bank. A lot of the time, that's not really necessary. You can just go onto the main banking service to minimize your costs. I mean, if you're doing a lot of international transfers and using various services and different methods of transfer, then fair enough. You might be better off spending a higher monthly amount, like 90 or 100 reais. But if you're not, just go for the simple, straightforward banking system, which you can operate directly on internet banking. It goes back to what I said in the first point about reducing costs, which you can't justify. There's no point having premium banking if you're not using it. You know, I was saying in point 1 of this video about reviewing all of your costs and removing things which you can't really justify, just to bring down unnecessary costs. It all makes a difference. It all adds up, right? And many people I know are switching to digital banks, which have 0 monthly costs. They only charge when you make an international transfer or a specific usage, but it might be more economical to look at some of the digital options available in the marketplace. I believe it's appropriate also to mention a mega trend which is going on here in Brazil within the financial sector. It's called desbancarização, right? Complex word in Portuguese, but it means the movement away from traditional banks towards other service providers. For example, if you go and see your bank manager, he or she may say, this is a great insurance product. This is a great previdência privada product, like a PGBL, which I mentioned in point 3. And here's, for example, a good insurance or an investment product. You can look for better deals in other institutions in the financial sector, you know, even medium and small providers. You can go and talk to an independent financial advisor. You can go and talk to an advisor who operates on a fund platform and look for better deals for all of the items that I mentioned. So have a look whenever your bank manager talks about a PGBL. Bear in mind, there might be another provider which offers you that pension or investment solution with a more favorable cost and with more fund options, which can give you a wider range of outcomes in relation to your profile. Wow, what a romantic setting to discuss our last point. This is sunset over Ipanema Beach. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, and I never get bored of it. So let's talk about money transfers, shall we? Now, as I was talking about in my last point about desbancarização, it's also better to look at specialist money transfer companies instead of going to your bank to actually make that transfer. Now, these are alternative companies. Now, there are several options on the market. It depends on the amount. So don't always feel that you have to have one money transfer account. It depends on how much you're transferring and the pair as well. Are you going from Brazilian reals to dollars or to sterling or to euros or to Indian rupees or whatever? You know, just because one company offers you a preferential rate with one pairing doesn't mean that that's the most appropriate company for every pairing, right? So do ask around and keep your options open. Now, the 2 key benefits of working through a specialist money transfer company, the 2 key benefits are, firstly, you're going to get a favorable rate, a significant rate, and it all adds up, as I said, back to point 1, right? It all adds up when you're making these savings. And secondly, it's much, much less bureaucratic, okay? And whether you need to transfer money in the near future, I recommend expats to always have an account set up. It can be set up with a 0 balance, but as long as the compliance is done, you know, you provided them with items like your passport, your proof of address. Sometimes they ask for more information if the amount of transfer is going to be above a certain level. For greater amounts, there's obviously more compliance, but it's always good to have an up-to-date money transfer account ready, because as we've seen over the course of 2020, there have been wild swings and the Brazilian real has depreciated quite a lot. Let's see what happens next year, but there are a lot of opportunistic transfers going on, so it's quite helpful if you already have everything in place, such that all you need to do is make the transfer if the rate spikes in one direction or another. Great, so I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll be in touch shortly with our next 5 tips to make 2021 a cracking financial year. If you have any specific questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch via our website in the link below. go to the contact page, complete the form, and yeah, ask away. Have a great Christmas and New Year. Cheers.